This conference could not happen without the unconditional support of our sponsors. We cannot be overstated how much Charlie and our staff work to secure these vendor sponsorships, so thank you. To be fair, these vendors are supporting this association notwithstanding several conflicts with other major networks all holding their conferences within a few weeks of our own. These sponsors and exhibitors, together with those on our trade show floor, have risen above those conflicts and have made the commitment to support this association as well. Thank you to all of you. Please frequent them in the exhibit hall and thank them for their participation and commitment to all of our parks. The exhibit hall opens immediately after this meeting, so I invite you to go out that door, make an immediate turn, and go right into the exhibit hall. Before coming to a close with these remarks, I would like to thank our moderators and panelists in the breakout sessions. They are freely giving of their time to help guide our business. I sincerely hope you will enjoy the next couple of days, education and networking. All of the sessions will be held in this wing in the Versailles Hallrooms. We encourage you to download the FeedLoop application as well for schedules, locations, and access to all of the presentations. Let me now call on a couple of committees for their reports. First, Treasurer's report, Rebecca Jones.
Thank you, Steve. Not to be overplayed much during this entire conference, but as most of you know, 2020 and 2021 have been very, very difficult times for each one of us in our parks and such, and there's no difference for the IATP as well. We're thankful for the efforts of all of the association members for continuing their membership. We're thankful greatly to our sponsors for their continued support of us as we all battle through this. So needless to say, in terms of our financial performance over the last little while, it's been a little bit difficult. The association ran a slight deficit in 2020, and we're running a slight deficit year-to-date this year in 2021. But Bethany and Sarah and the team, working with both Pete and Steve, have done an excellent job of trying to control our costs. So in terms of that, unfortunately, we've had some reduction of staff. So we've reduced some of the staff. We've also been able to restructure a lot of our conference expenses as well. So recall that the biggest event we always put on is this event. And last year in 2020, when we weren't able to have it, it was important for us to be able to push or defer some of those costs. And Bethany and team were able to do an excellent job here with this hotel, and then also our EU efforts as well. So while we did run a deficit, we have been able to control our costs from that perspective, and the board's confident in our ability to continue on strong from that perspective. The last thing I will mention is that, similar to our members as well, the IATP was able to secure an SBA EIDL, an economic injury disaster loan as well. So the association board voted to take that loan. It's a $250,000 loan. The other good thing about it, so it was great that we were able to secure that, but the excellent thing with that as well is that we have not tapped into that it is in reserve. So it's there for the association if we need it, but at this point we have not drawn it down. So again, it's been a difficult time for all of us. We thank you for being here. We thank you for your support. We thank you for the board's volunteer efforts as well, and all of our sponsors especially that have spent the time to come down here and be with us. And we look forward to continued success in the next year. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Now we'll call on Phil Slager for the Insurance Committee report. Phil?
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. I'm privileged to present the insurance report. I'll limit my remarks to the domestic market. The insurance committee's been actively working and engaged in several different things. One of them is we're pleased to announce our continued partnership with House Wilkerson Insurance to provide the IATP insurance program here in the domestic market. Doug, say hi. Good morning. They've provided the program now for 7 years, and we're happy to report that a fairly significant number of members are actively involved with the program, and it continues to be healthy, strong, and vibrant, and continues to do what the board has asked it to do, which is, in essence, provide a reliable insurance market for trampoline park owners as an option when you're considering insurance. One of the things that we're sad to report is that we have one major carrier exit the market. They elected to do that as a decision within their insurance company. And I know that's created a lot of concern. I strongly suggest that you lean on your trusted insurance advisors for the latest information on what's happening in the marketplace and how that may impact your business, if at all. We do know, there's one piece of good news in that. We do know that the U.S. domestic market is strong, and we do know that there are many players actively in the market that are willing to write this business, and that's encouraging. So again, I would take those two pieces of information and I would give it their trusted advisors, and there are several of them here in the room, and talk through that situation and see if it even pertains to you, and if it does, what are your options. Going forward, there's a couple of things to think about for the industry, and one of them is the health of your insurance companies. In other words, how do we make sure that our insurance companies are happy, that they're happy partners, that we're good stewards of the trust that they're placing in us, meaning putting their premium dollars to work to insure the parks. And that again is a conversation that you can have with your brokers, and they'll be happy to tell you some of the underwriting guidelines and some of the expectations that the individual carriers have. We're happy to report that we believe there's plenty of capacity, and hopefully that will continue in the future. The last thing I'd like to say is that this afternoon we're having a session on insurance. And if you have questions or concerns or just want to sit in, we encourage you, if you're not an operator or an insurance professional, to join us this afternoon. And we're going to basically sit down and go through some of the things that are happening in the marketplace and answer any questions that you may have that we can help you with. And that's the insurance report. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. And finally, I call on our Executive Vice President, Bethany Evans, for a couple of committee reports. Bethany, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you to the board. Thank you all for being here today. We can't emphasize enough how much we appreciate all of your continued support. The IATP is your industry trade association. We are not a brand. We are bigger than a brand. This industry is bigger than one brand. And by coming together, we give you a voice in matters of government relations, with insurance, and all the important topics to you and your parks. I'll start with the government relations. Just to give you a quick overview, there were 2 states that have been regulated since we last met. That is Illinois and Virginia. So if you do have parks or members in those states, I would encourage you to get involved. If you'd like to discuss the details of that regulation, I'm happy to do so at any time during this conference, or I'm always available, phone call away and email away. In addition to our U.S. legislative efforts that the IATP was heavily involved with, we are also working with the Japanese Consumer Affairs as they look to address issues in the trampoline park industry in Japan. So if you do have parks in Japan, I'm guessing our audience here is a bit more domestic, but if you do have parks that are in Japan, I would encourage you to engage as well. So both are all important, international and domestic. In terms of our education committee, which we do need volunteers, as Steve mentioned, to get involved, we have some great opportunities coming up. We have our EU conferences. We're finally going to be back with the EU in May of 2022. So we do need people to get involved with that. And in addition, we are excited to launch a scholarship program for your park employees starting in 2022. And what that scholarship will do, it is going to be awarded to a staff person, court monitor, a attendant at the front register who demonstrates exemplary skills and shows enthusiasm for their efforts and their work. So that is something that we're very proud to offer moving forward to incentivize your team members and get them to engage in the industry and be a part of the process. The last piece of it is our membership. As we all know, 2021 and moving into 2020 and 2021 has been a trying period for our industry, and not just our industry, but the entire economic success of the world. So our membership is slightly down, but I'm proud to say that members are continuing to renew as they open and get reestablished, and we are currently at 238 park members globally and 100 associate members as well. So if you have questions, please reach out. Membership is due for renewal January 1st. We are now on an annual calendar, not to confuse folks, so membership is good through December the 31st. So please, again, if you have any questions, if you want to talk, you have issues, concerns, please raise them for us. We're here to help you. We work for you. So thank you.
Bethany, thank you. It's now my privilege to introduce our speaker for this morning's session. And it's a gentleman I've known for years. So it's kind of a privilege to not only introduce him, but also to look back at some of his accomplishments. And I'm going to tell you just some of them. Let me start with philanthropy. As master of the Masonic Lodge of California, vice chair for the finance committee for the Brandon Masonic Lodge in California. At one time, he was the chair for a education trust with assets over $3 billion. Steve was recently elected the Supreme Council of the Order of Eagle Lynn, which is a premier youth organization associated with the Masonic fraternity. Back in his past history, you got a 4.0 GPA. Wow.
It's kindergarten.
That was kindergarten. Coming forward, Steve has served in various capacities. He's taken companies into the New York Stock Exchange. He's a turnaround specialist, if you will, and has taken several companies and taken them and cleaned them up and taken them into the realm of venture capital. At one time, Steve was the chief financial officer for a company called Cartridge World, which had over 1,600 franchises around the world. More recently, Steve served as the chief financial officer for Skyzone Franchise Group, and he took the company from 24 parks to over 175 parks and set the stage for what eventually became its assimilation into the Circus Tricks brand. Currently, Steve is the CEO for Flight Adventure Parks, and we're happy to have him as our chief financial officer. I'm sorry, chief executive officer, a recovering CFO. And he's also my very good friend. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to the vice chair for the International Association of Trampoline Parks, Mr. Steve Young.
Our CFO is there, so I really like to thank the association for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today. Caught up. I believe in evolution. I don't mean that in the political context it's often discussed. Rather simply, I believe in progress over time. You get to see this at the Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian, just down the road from us in Virginia. You realize the megalodon of over 1 million years ago was quite different from the sharp swimming of the Pacific Ocean today. Well, for the record, I'm afraid of them both. Crocodiles, house cats, monkeys, they've all changed with the times. They survived because they adapted and they thrived. And if they didn't, they'd become extinct. Just ask the brontosaurus and dodo bird. Of course, this applies to humans and companies as well. People of today are much different than people of 100 years ago, even much less 1,000 years ago, when you actually might have fit into modern airline scene. Today we're taller, healthier, likely smarter than our ancestors, though it doesn't always show. Something fundamental was also changing in business. Nobody could have anticipated what we went through the last 18 months. The companies that adapt to the profound shifts of our economy and our circumstance will have the best chance to survive. Before we bounce forward, as our theme here at this conference, let's go back and take a quick look at the history of business to remind ourselves just how much the nature of an industry can change over time and how we can again begin to thrive. I'm starting in the 8th century BC. In India, were organizations called Shrine, were the first firms that could independently enter into contracts or own property, which also meant they could sue and be sued. So I guess some things in business don't change. By AD 960, China's Song Dynasty saw the advent of gunpowder, printing presses, and paper money, and the first partnerships and joint stock companies to resemble our own capital structures. Things were moving. Beginning in 1500, government-backed firms like the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company began global trading empires, floating stocks and bonds on new exchanges as their goods floated around the world. The tea trade alone reshaped the world map. By about 1790, the Industrial Revolution was underway. And with all that tea to brew, firms like Wedgwood found ways to standardize their processes and to make one whole teapot by using multiple people, as opposed to making one teapot at a time. Lots and lots of teapots. In fact, the branding and marketing that they needed to serve this growing consumer industry was astounding. By 1870, as the railroads lowered the cost of moving goods and information, a new type of company, founder-led trusts, emerged, spawning monopolies in so many industries that the booming needed a little busting. With trusts outlawed by the 1920s, those founder-led firms were replaced by professionally managed corporations, owned by retail investors and run by executives. Management became a career. By the 1960s, those managers were running a rapidly expanding universe of sprawling conglomerates. With the turmoil of the 1970s came a new way of thinking. People thought bell-bottoms looked good, and somebody thought disco leisure suits were a good idea. But they also wanted to unlock the value trapped in companies by making sure investors, managers, and indeed customers shared the same interests, as they were all tied to a common balance sheet. This launched a wave of leveraged buyouts. It also created a focus on short-term results versus long-term value, which I still think is a problem. Change and adaptation, those are our constants. How do companies and industries successfully navigate these curves? Since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, business entered into a new era roughly every 50 years. But if you're an executive today, and you all are, you don't need numbers to tell you that a new era is beginning at a much faster pace than any time in our history. You feel it, you're experiencing it, and we're figuring out how to thrive again after unimaginable circumstances. Just a few weeks ago, we were all poised to leave COVID behind. U.S. President Joe Biden declared the U.S. close to independence from the virus. Around the globe, people and governments are finding out that COVID won't be thrashed into extinction, but rather will suffer a long endemic tail. Experts estimate after racing ahead, the now stalled U.S. vaccine campaign will take 8 or 9 months to reach 75% coverage for a number of reasons. COVID will be remembered as one of the grave circumstances of our century, but I don't think it's ever going to shut us down again. The good news is this: we've proven that our business models work, and we're still attractive in a post-COVID environment. Through the moves we've made, the allowances of our landlords, and the aggressive pursuit of governmental allowances, I pray we are all, once again, in a solid financial position. This is great news for everyone, but we haven't gotten there without some heart-wrenching decisions. All of us have had to make those calls. Some of the critical decisions that we've made over the past few weeks and months have been really tough, really tough. Like you and yours, I have been surrounded by a dedicated and enormously talented group of people in our company. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the support of my beautiful wife, Stacy. She's inspired me since 1978. There's a picture of us back in the day. This picture was taken on November 25th, 1978, the night we announced our engagement, and the night that I was installed as a state leader of the fraternal youth organization. There were over 10,000 members in that service organization in California that year. It's my jeweled office hanging around my neck, and I think the rust-colored tuxedo is a nice touch too. Now, truth be told, Stacy and I broke up 6 months later, only to reconnect in 2017 and got married in 2019, so that's a happy ending. But she inspired me to take that leadership position then. And I learned so much about leadership at a very young age. She also inspired me to take on this opportunity at Flood. The convention over which I presided in 1979 was kind of a big deal for the local news stations. One reporter sought to challenge our purpose and the values as being obsolete, especially in light of world events. At the time, we were in a massive energy crisis. Diplomats, just a few weeks prior, had been taken hostage at the U.S. Embassy in Iran. And President Carter spoke of the national crisis of confidence. A reporter stuck his microphone in my face and said, "Aren't your organization's values really outdated? Isn't this just all obsolete and too old-fashioned?" My instinctive response was to defend our values and let the reporter know in no uncertain terms that in times of crisis, our values never mattered more. Yet that exchange actually ended up being picked up by the national news and was aired on the ABC Evening News the next night. I was just as passionate about the precepts of Dima Lake as I am for the values of our association and my company today. I'm still active in Dima Lake today. In June of this year, I was elected to the International Supreme Council of that organization. My grandfather had a great perspective. He believed that if you cared enough to have an opinion, to belong to something, you might as well have an opinion about it. That was true for me for Dima Lake, for Boy Scouts. I hope for every job I've had. And here I am standing before you today. If we're carrying a business card for our company, we might as well have it branded on our hearts. I am morally and emotionally invested in my company. And I know all of you are too. I love my company, and I love the people with whom I have the honor to work. Many of the advisors I had in Dima Lake, those mentors I had in business, many of them are gone, but some remain. And so do some of the lessons they taught me that I'd like to share with you now. I hope you might find this useful. I think a lot of people get trapped in the idea that their job function or title are nothing more than ordinary. I think we can all feel that way sometimes. We all have people working in our organization like that. Salaried managers, teachers, students, office workers, and many others may feel like their professions or lack of a fancy title mean they're meant to be a follower. That couldn't be more wrong, in my view. Leadership comes in many shapes and sizes. Its qualities are subtle. There are 12 signs that show we're not just average leaders, but we're remarkably good leaders. You lead when you need to. all met those that serve go-getters who feel the need to be in charge no matter the task at hand. Whether it's a group project, following an itinerary, or just a brainstorming session, they need to be in charge. And they make sure everybody knows it. Always being in charge, however, doesn't translate to good leadership. Good leaders know their areas of expertise. They work for the good of the project, not themselves. They know when to stand aside and to hand over the baton. I've tried to do that with a remarkable team of people that we've assembled at our company in every discipline. Once you hand over that baton, be prepared to give your best to those leading the charge. Knowing when to be a follower is really being a remarkable leader. Lead for a cause, not a promotion. While it's important to have ambition, a remarkably good leader dedicates their energies first to the cause, then to the team, and lastly, to him or herself. Leadership often comes with power, but that's not its defining characteristic. If you take on a project only to hope to reap rewards for yourself, it will show in its outcome, reflected on the morale of the team. You break the rules. Leadership is about redefining things, finding new solutions, and leading others to bigger and better things. Remarkably good leaders don't stay in a single place and carry out their activities inside a box. Leadership is about bringing progress and provoking evolution. And none of this can be done from inside the status quo. Now don't please take this as license to go out and violate ASTM standards, but be willing to offer solutions that others may not have thought of. This in turn should welcome and encourage input. Speak out. You spot a double standard? Did you witness an injustice? Remarkably good leaders speak up in the face of adversity and stand up for what is right, not what's popular. Standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves is an important characteristic of a leader. Know your team. Imagine taking the wheel of a project but having no idea with whom you're working or what their strengths are. Now imagine working on a project or having the person in charge not know your name, or worse, call you by the wrong name. Remarkably good leaders know everything they need to know about each and every member of their team. They're personable and always have their preferences in mind when delegating duties. How well do you know everyone in your course? Appoint people to the right posts. What is good is to know your team and their abilities. Know how to take advantage of those abilities. They welcome it and appreciate that ability. Remarkably good leaders don't just know what their team's about. They know how to best delegate their strengths and weaknesses to get results. Give credit where credit's due. Once a goal is reached, it's easy for others to place credit on their team leader. Bad leaders reap in the spotlight, and are ready to take credit for the end results. Meanwhile, a remarkably good leader never fails to highlight individual accomplishments. Using we when we speak of triumphs goes a long way. True leaders know they're nothing without the people supporting them, and they're not afraid of showing it. Be extremely accountable. Everybody makes mistakes, and remarkably good leaders are not an exception. Failure more than successes separate the good from the bad, given that the latter searches for someone to blame instead of taking responsibility themselves. Great leaders often speak of failure in terms of I and take responsibility for their team. Remarkably good leaders are not fazed by periods of failure. At least they have a good team to support that they get through it with. Trust your intuition. When leading a team into uncharted territory, remarkably good leaders trust themselves to make sound decisions. They also know when to stop and critically analyze the situation. They draw from past experiences or ask for help from mentors or experienced members of their team. Fear of the unknown doesn't hold them back because they believe in themselves and they believe in their team. Your positivity will always be contagious. No matter the situation, remarkably good leaders keep their spirits high. They take failures gracefully, and successes do not lift their heads. They keep an appropriate sense of humor, show humility, and more than team members, they have friends. Remarkably good leaders generate enthusiasm for the work that they do. Their positivity is contagious, and it shows on the quality of their team's job. Be a good listener. Remarkably good leaders don't want to rule their team. They want to work together. This means they're open to listening to new ideas or projects and are not afraid of seeking advice or learning from others. Most importantly, remarkably good leaders also listen to criticism and don't become defensive or upset when a team member or client voices a concern or points out an inconsistency or a mistake. Finally, inspire others to change. Remarkably good leaders know the difference between dictating and leading. Dictating involves threatening team members and getting results. Leading involves inspiring people to give the best that they have. Remarkably good leaders inspire their team to become the best versions of themselves. They should build solid foundations and are not afraid of showing that they care. If you are always searching for ways to make people around you better, your people will be inspired to grow into that, and their work will reflect how proud they are to be on your team. As we manage through the changes of our industry, all of these traits of a great leader must be delivered with authenticity. Managing change requires leaders to focus simultaneously on overseeing the business and providing effective leadership. Now more than ever, a focus on leading people through transformative behaviors while maintaining authenticity is required to keep our teams engaged and motivated. To effectively lead an organization through times of significant change, we need to work harder at honing our authenticity. Doing so will help us build a culture of trust, where the demands of both our businesses and people can be met. Our relationships, whether they be with our financial sponsors, our guests, our team members, or each other for that matter, will matter more than ever. Accordingly, our communication and our connections matter, as well as the standards to which we hold one another accountable. We went through a lengthy process at Flight constructing these values. In living these values, we need talent, skill, and imagination. But more than anything else, we need to be able to speak and communicate with authenticity. To speak so that we inspire people around us to listen, so that we continue to learn each and every day. None of us can gaze at our reflection and self-proclaim, "I'm so authentic." It doesn't work that way. Authenticity needs to be experienced in dialogue and in relationship. That means living our values not only with our heads, with ideas, strategic behaviors, and analytics, but more importantly with our hearts and our guts, with empathy and with courage. Here are some thoughts around authenticity. Our heads are all about the technical skills that got us hired in the first place. What truly distinguishes us is our ability to connect with, motivate, and inspire others. Having a career that's focused as much on others as it is ourselves. At some point, we need to look up from our spreadsheets and PowerPoints and processes, poke our heads out, and allow ourselves to be seen. We know that when people are heard and seen and understood, they're more likely to be happy. And when they're happy, they'll outperform. Our hearts guide our words, and in our actions. And we must signal to others, I care enough to see you. I became president of Partridge World in 2008, with some 1,565 stores in 55 countries around the world. I was worried about getting the respect of our franchisees, and I decided that I would go out and work in a store, and invited our entire corporate team to go out and work in a store 1 week a year. And we did. It was great fun. I started by learning everyone's names. I asked stupid questions, and while they got a laugh putting this executive to work, filling cartridges, or cleaning up spilled toner, we built a relationship. I was not the smartest, most talented person working in those stores, but I had the power of true relationships. I took a risk by leading from my heart, knowing that the reward was greater than any inadequacy I felt. Being vulnerable was my pathway to making meaningful connections. It takes guts, better known as courage, to be authentic and aligned with our values, especially in these times. Each of us has to model our own behavior, understanding that we have to not only reflect our own values, but challenge ourselves to ensure we are truly adhering to them on behalf of our guests and ourselves. I do believe that we will come out of this on the other side much better as a force for change. What we say and what we do, and how that gets said and done, must be done without fear of failure. There's an art to being vulnerable. When someone is described as super extrovert, we might think of someone hosting a game show, or maybe even the person hawking wares at the county fair. That's not being charismatic, and it's certainly not authentic. Without vulnerability, authenticity becomes impossible. Ken Blanchard, management expert, and the co-author of the 1 Minute Manager, observed in a conversation with me some years ago, if you don't know who you are, or what your strengths and weaknesses are, and you're unwilling to be vulnerable, you probably will never develop a trusting relationship. The irony is that being authentic and being vulnerable is also the secret to becoming charismatic. People are drawn to those who are genuine, willing to show that who they are and make it safe for others to be vulnerable as well. Finally, make it real. As much as we all Zoom, Skype, Team, and all the rest, many of us are still in our own spaces. It's hard to transcend that separateness, no matter how big the camera lens is. Technology can make the connection possible, but emotion, authentic and palpable, makes it real. Some of you may know my passion for spaceflight. Last year, I was invited into a virtual celebration of life for Al Gordon, who was the command module pilot for Apollo 15. As face after face of famous astronauts populated the screen, I felt incredible warmth and joy in connecting with these incredible heroes. We shared a good laugh as one very famous astronaut who flew to the moon couldn't figure out his Zoom controls, and the entire time all we saw were his eyeglasses peering into his camera. The banter back and forth was fun and authentic. Authenticity means taking a risk to show others our true selves. It's uncomfortable and vulnerable, and it always carries with it the very human fear of not fitting in. But the greater risk is being inauthentic. Indeed, we want others to see us, but if we want them to see us, we must allow ourselves to be seen. As an industry, we're more open than we've ever been, trying what we can do to help each other. We are, and we always will be, stronger together than we ever will be apart. We have some challenges yet to conquer, but we will not stand for being defined or we lost to this virus. Rather, I hope and pray we'll be defined by how we responded to it. Let wrap this up. COVID virtually shut down all the businesses. We matter to people. What we sell, the business we're in, the service we provide matters. Look at the statistics pre-pandemic and the number of businesses that did not survive. Instead, the principal foundations of your business, our industry, are fun, confidence building, provide time with friends, offer proud moments with parents. We didn't roll over. We committed to the hard work of protocols as if your life, and it did, depend upon it. Adopting a maniacal focus on the details of reassuring and protecting guests and team members and not letting anyone cut corners was incredibly necessary. This took great leadership and authentic communication. I invite you to continue this crusade for greatness. In the coming days, our ability to thrive will be largely driven by your continued ability to harness these tools as leaders and drawing on the resources available to you to support your vision, mission, and values, and conquering new opportunities. The IATP will be here to support you. It's intimidating. I get it. It can be overwhelming at times. I can feel that too. But from the bottom of my heart, I can tell you there's no place to rather be. I'll leave you with a final thought. Walt Disney was a CEO with a vision, and I believe our vision can reflect the Imagineering, as he called it, the combination of imagination and engineering that will deliver upon the promise of the hopes and dreams of our guests. It would take longer than anybody has the time for to say things about Walt Disney. History has shown him to be a bit flawed, but he believed in gift-wrapping the world of imagination, and he tried to keep it that way for both children and adults. He probably did more to heal, or at least soothe, the human spirit than all the psychiatrists in all the world. Like our vision, he chose to believe in imagination and the promise of a better tomorrow. When he passed in 1966, people said, "We may never see his life again." I hope and pray that we do. Thank you for your time this morning. Enjoy the conference. God bless you. We'll see you around. Thanks. We're adjourned.